Hello everyone, it's Greg from Edinburgh Renaissance Fencing Academy here. Today I have a somewhat philosophical and possibly controversial video to present to you on the topic of verisimilitude in historical fencing. So please bear with me and hear my argument until the end, and hopefully you'll find it interesting and helpful. So firstly, a quick definition. The word verisimilitude is just a fancy way of saying the appearance of reality or truth. Or another way of thinking about it is it means a kind of simulated reality. In the modern world, the word verisimilitude is most commonly used in literature and cinema, where it refers to stories which are believable, which have a solid internal logic, which makes us buy into them. It makes us feel like we're inside a real world, even if the story itself is very fantastical. So a good and well-known example of this is J.R.R. Tolkien's famous work, The Lord of the Rings. It's a fantasy work. It's got wizards and orcs and magic spells and stuff like this. But it also has verisimilitude. The world has its own internal logic, and the characters and events follow the rules and rationale of that logic in a very consistent way, which means we can become immersed in that world and it feels real to us when we're reading those books. So, what does all this have to do with historical fencing? When we practice and train any historical martial art, we are, by definition, simulating a kind of reality. We're simulating a fight from a historical period. Historical martial arts are not modern martial arts. They're not things which are being actively used in the real world for their original purpose. So we have to try and recreate them from sources. So we're simulating the reality of a sword fight from the past. Sometimes people forget that. They feel like they're actually having a sword fight with somebody. It's not true. You're not using a sharp sword. Your life is not in any danger when you practice historical fencing. So you're taking part in a kind of simulation of a real combat rather than taking part in a real combat. So when you are in the training hall, when you're in the salle, the concept of verisimilitude is extremely important. We have to buy into certain ideas, to certain rules, to keep our simulation accurate and faithful and authentic. This is probably the most important area where historical fencing and modern sports fencing are different. Modern sports fencing doesn't need verisimilitude. It's a game. It has the rules of that game. The purpose is to score points, win tournaments, etc., etc. I've spoken about this before in other videos. The purpose of historical fencing systems is to win and survive real fights with sharp swords. Now, we cannot and should not have real fights with sharp swords, but we always have to have this idea in our mind. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to survive this fight, which means our focus should be on defense at all times. Defense and protection of ourselves. Now, this works well when both people who are engaging in a drill or in a bout buy into this idea and they follow the rules and principles of whatever fencing system you're studying. That fencing system contains specific rules and principles which the master has identified and outlined because they are the best way to avoid getting killed in a real fight. So we have to trust what the master says and follow his rules in order to accurately simulate a fight in that particular style of swordsmanship. A surprising number of historical fencing practitioners forget that when they get a sword in their hand and they start doing stuff with a partner. And they start thinking about scoring a hit, scoring a hit, scoring a hit, beating the other guy, being the best. It's wrong. You should be thinking about protecting yourself. Now, at a simple level, that means being prepared to parry the opponent's attacks in a good way. But there are subtleties to that as well. It means, for example, always being covered from your opponent's threat, from your opponent's blade, and only attacking your opponent, only initiating an attack of your opponent if you are covered and if there is not a significant chance of your opponent just hitting you when you close into them. I can't emphasize enough how important that idea is for the accurate reproduction of historical fencing systems. All too often, what I see in bouts is people feel the adrenaline rushing through their system, they throw themselves at their opponent, they start fencing really fast and really hard, and then they land a hit on their opponent, and then they congratulate themselves for having succeeded. But this is not success if at the moment you strike your opponent, the tip of your opponent's sword is in front of your face. Maybe in that bout the tip did not make contact with your fencing mask, but it very easily could have, and the tip being here in front of your face is not safe. Therefore, you have broken one of the cardinal rules of good historical fencing, which is always be covered, always be protected. So this is really the key point of the video today. When you are fencing in whatever style of swordsmanship it is that you study, always protect yourself first from whatever the threat the opponent is offering to you. Secondly, you try and end the fight by, of course, landing a hit on your opponent. Secondly, but to maintain an accurate simulation of reality, you must respect the threat that your opponent offers you, and you must deal with it appropriately. Only if both people participating in the drill and the bout have that level of respect and understand that they're simulating a specific type of historical fight, only then will the system that you're studying work the way it's intended to. Because these systems were used by people who didn't want to die. That's the basic reality of it. So, don't just do any old thing to hit your opponent, however you can. Make sure you're protected and make sure you're using the actual techniques from whatever system you are studying. The techniques have been specifically chosen by the master because they're safe and efficient. So to bring things back to primary sources, I'm going to read out a little section from my main source material, which is the treatise of Giacomo di Grassi, Italian, from 1570. So in the last section of his book, or one of the last sections of his book, he starts talking about fencers who rely too much on false or deceitful fencing. In other words, there are people who use lots of tricks to try and beat their opponent when they are practicing fencing in a training situation. And so this is what he has to say about them. He says, so these people, without having even a bit of regard to tempo, advantage or measure, they throw blows in every possible manner, believing that they surely must either be swifter than their enemies or more perceptive and insightful. In holding such opinions, they are all arrogant and brutish, for most often, when they succeed in wounding and manhandling their enemies with a feinted thrust or a cut, they come away proud of themselves as if their blows were unstoppable. But most of the time, they end up hit and killed with a thrust from a simple and courageous man. In other words, don't delude yourself that you're somehow a good fencer because you've done some scrappy, fast, uncontrolled thing and you happen to land a hit. It's not good fencing, and in a real fight, you'll get killed. And that is the reality that we're trying to simulate. That is good verisimilitude within the world of historical fencing. Okay, so that is my argument. A little tip for bringing this into practice. The best practice that I try to encourage in my own fencing club is if you strike your opponent and you recognize that it was a dangerous blow, that you hadn't actually taken account of the threat of the opponent, own up to it. I try to do this when I fence. Yeah, I hit you, but it was stupid. You could have easily stabbed me through the face. So no, we're not going to count that hit. Or, yeah, I hit you, but I wasn't even paying attention to what I did. It was just random chance. Forget about it. Let's fence again. Let's do it properly. I can't recommend it enough. It will really, really improve your skills and improve the authenticity of what you're doing. All right. That's the end for today. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Bye.